Okay, well, we're here with my dear friend, longtime friend, Michael Udow, who's fantastic percussionist, of course, distinguished career as a percussion professor, but also an incredible composer. So it's so great. We're preparing two of his wonderful pieces for performance at the PASIC conference in San Antonio here in a couple of days. So we've just had our first rehearsal together
Yay,
with
first rehearsal.
two wonderful soloists.
That
So
went great.
thank you so much for being here, Mike.
Oh, no,
It's always great
pleasure.
to be around you, but also especially to be able to do your music. So the two pieces that we're doing, Apparition, the first one,
Yes.
timpani piece. So would you tell us about it? I mean, what was the motivation? When did you write it?
The first incarnation of the work was for percussion ensemble and solo timpani, and the basic idea, it's not two tetrachords, but there's four notes that I extracted from the first melodic entrance of the first trumpet in Shostakovich 11th Symphony, year 1905.
Right.
And so it has those pitches, ba beep ba ba ba, and that's the opening notes in the timpani solo. And then the Bach Art of the Fugue.
Right.
And so those are utilized almost as tetrachords, where they become the pitch material, intervallic material for the entire work.
Yeah, you build the whole piece.
And yes, I could hear the orchestration when I was asked to compose the work, which was for John Haas and his ensemble at Peabody Conservatory, commissioned it in the percussion ensemble version. And I was writing it, I heard it as wind ensemble, I heard it as orchestra. And so there's also a chamber version for piano to percussion and timpani.
Oh, I didn't know about that. version.
So for a recital piece.
Right, sure.
So that it would have a life in case it was never performed by
Right.
such a great maestro and fine wind ensemble as UT. So
No, but it's a really wonderful piece, and I think the association, just the title Apparition with it, was that the original thought from the beginning, or did you sort of get into putting all this together, and the spirit seemed to just
it did all congeal together when I was thinking about the Shostakovich and writing it after the pogrom in 1905, where the poor families went to the Tsar's palace
Right.
and were slaughtered, and that their souls, in a sense, kind of emerge out of the composition.
right.
And yet there's this sense of vitality and life and joie de vivre
Right.
of any society that's gone through that. So, and it's very interesting that here's these people in Russia that have suffered this, but then at the hands of Russia, the Poles,
Right.
and the Czechs, and the Bulgarians, and the
All right,
Hungarians,
the list goes on.
yeah, and then there's Pol Pot in Cambodia, and
Right.
I mean all this litany of man's inhumanity to man,
Right.
and so it's in the essence of the piece.
Right, and I think, and just from a standpoint of a percussionist, a timpanist performing this piece, it's a really wonderful, in a way, combination of showpiece for the timpanist on one hand, because it's quite virtuosic, but yet you're not. At least for me, when I hear the piece, I'm not obsessed by the virtuosity of the performer, so that somehow you lose the spirit of the piece, which I think is what you want.
Yes, yeah, precisely. Oh, well, if that came across, then I'm a happy camper.
No, I think so. Yeah, I think it's a really, really wonderful piece and creates such a wonderful atmosphere. And the ending. Talk about the ending of the piece a little bit. This churning sort of music that just.
Oh,
Yeah. Right.
yeah. Well, out of this mournful sense,
Sort of desolate. Yeah.
desolate, that out of this comes this sense of hope.
Right.
So it's like Vyspiansky kind of Vesela, the rose in Poland,
Right.
where in literature, where the rose represents, in a sense, the Polish people, and that the blossoming, when the roses in the winter, they're protected in straw and hay,
Right.
and they're silent. But then in the spring, of course, there's a blossoming, and so there's this political allegory in this play about the blossom, Poland being the analogous rose,
Right.
and the blossoming of their nation and culture under the oppression of, whether it was Germany when Gdańsk.
The poor Poles. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
They've been
mean,
in
they're
the
just
middle
on
of-
those trade routes,
Exactly.
So whether it's Gdańsk in Nazi Germany, it was Danzig, right?
Right.
And so all these border changes and so on. So
Right, and they're always right in the middle of it, but yet there's this incredible, beautiful spirit about always optimistic, and so that's the way the piece ends. With that
Yes.
sense of optimism, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a really wonderful piece, I think, and our soloist is really plays it beautifully, I think.
Oh,
So,
Dan, yes.
Yeah, Dan Karras, who's a former student of yours.
Yes, yeah, undergrad student of mine, and he studied with Brian Jones, who's a timpanist in Dallas Symphony,
Right.
who's played the orchestral version
Exactly.
and recorded it,
Right.
and then has gone on in his own right to have a wonderful.
Right, and Brian was a timpanist in the Detroit Symphony. for a while.
Correct,
Yes.
and adjunct professor teaching with me at Michigan. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So that's it's the people who will hear the piece performed at PASIC, and hopefully will hear it in other venues will know what a fantastic piece it is. But we're also doing on this, that's not the whole program, that's only a small portion of the program, because the rest of it is devoted to your piece Moonshadows, which is as Frederick Fennell would say, that's just one big tapeworm of a piece. It just goes and goes. But it's a wonderful piece. And so, can you talk about this and how Moonshadows came into being? You were talking about
okay.
that a little bit earlier. You and your
Nancy,
wife. Yeah, right.
Okay, sure. Nancy is a dancer, choreographer. One of the pieces that came out of this duo was Over the Moon, which is basically the exact same solo part. Tony, there's a few little improvisational moments, and of course Tony's taken that in his own way, which is wonderful.
Tony DeSanza, who's the soloist. On that
Yes, right.
Basic concert.
Thank you. And but basically the solo percussion part's exactly the same as the duo.
Ah, I see. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the little handbell section is an example. I played, let's see, I had 3 handbells and 2 in this hand. So I played 5 of the notes, and Nancy had a handbell in each hand.
Right.
And so she also played percussion. I also moved in the duo piece.
Right.
So, and then Nancy played the frying pan, the percussion
Right.
4 is playing, and so on. So, but basically, the part's exactly the same. Well, one gets older.
Right.
Nancy decided it was time to retire the duo after 37 years. So, but this composition lingered Over the Moon, and I thought it should go on. It should have a life beyond our duo. And so I thought about, could I keep the solo part and then write counter melodies and give it a new harmonic
Sure.
look, and that carnation of it is Moonshadows in the wind ensemble version, which later I've done an orchestra version of.
It's so interesting because then, so really we can say the piece has been expanded, but it hasn't been expanded necessarily in length or in duration, but just it's sort of been expanded this
Vertically,
way,
yes.
rather than horizontally.
Right. And then the counterpoint. And then as far as the composition, it is based on poetry. So the opening section is based on a poem that I had written called Children of the World. And it was after My Lai and after Pol Pot's regime and so on and so forth. And the starvation in the northern Africa and the famines and so on.
Terrible famine,
Right. And the children have no choice in all of this.
Right.
And it's so much bound up in the politics, global politics.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, where the grain is in the silos it's needed elsewhere.
It all becomes an economic matter in a way.
Right, and the farmers in this country, and it's not a sole U.S. problem, but the farmers in this country being paid to not plant crops, and yet people are starving in another part of the world. And so how does humanity cope with all this? So the poem is called "Children of the World," and this cyclical A prime, A2, A3 keeps coming back with just those two harmonic changes of tonic and dominant in the opening, and so the poem, and it's set syllabically to the poem. So that's the opening, and then the poems of the Moon. Nancy selected all 10 poems. Okay, and so, cuckoo, if you must, cry to the moon, not to me. I've heard your story. I set to music, and coincidentally, the last one, or the next to last poem, a small hungry child told to grind rice instead gazes at the moon. And so this whole hungry child sort of references as a little codetta, not melodically, but in spirituality, to the starving children at the beginning of the piece.
Well, I think that's the thing that, to me, as a listener and part of the performance that comes through, is the beautiful spiritual nature of the piece, that comes through and as I think enhanced by the orchestration and the expansion of it, because it gives it somehow, the solo part is so thrilling to listen to, and I could see how the piece would absolutely stand as a solo piece, because the colors are fantastic and it's really beautiful, but yet that the orchestra, the wind ensemble, sort of interacting then with the soloist, it just becomes more of this community sort of thing, which speaks to all this in a way. So I think it's a really, really wonderful piece, and it's a big piece too. I mean, it's 30 minutes or so.
Right. I did want to provide a vehicle. Not initially, obviously, with Nancy. I could have cut the piece down and made it shorter, but I thought, oh, wait a second. Beethoven wrote a piano concerto. Brahms can write a long piano concerto. Tchaikovsky violin concerto. And why not a percussion concerto if it can hold up to the scrutiny of that length, with elements that elevate it, that make it worthy of that time? Because no one needs another piece of music in the world. There's way too many composers and way too much music, and a lot of it's bad.
But this isn't, and so this, and I think that's one of the reasons I think the audience at PASIC will be thrilled to hear it, because let's face it, it's not been performed that often, at least within the big ensembles. And I believe that Scott Teeple conducted it in Madison. Is that correct? With Tony. That performance. So it's a piece that deserves to be performed everywhere. It's a really wonderful piece.
Oh, thanks. Well, and Tony's the only one playing it.
Right. Well, hopefully there will be others now that after people hear him down at PASIC. So it's so great to see you again and to work with you. And
well, Jerry, you are unbelievable. You're such a fine conductor and supportive colleague and friend, and I'm just ever so thankful. I'm truly thankful.
The pleasure, it's absolutely all mine, so it's great to see you. So
okay.
Good to meet my friend. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.